Imagine moving into a quiet, picture-perfect neighborhood where everyone smiles, waves, and promises community. But behind those manicured lawns and iron gates hides something darker, a system of control that doesn't welcome outsiders equally. Dean Caldwell thought he had found peace for his family. His daughter, Lucy Caldwell, was admired by neighbors, educated, and a rising entrepreneur. But when Lucy dared to say no to the demands of an HOA president known for intimidation, that peace shattered in the most terrifying way. A gun was drawn, reputations were tested, and one shocking truth turned the entire neighborhood upside down. Dean Caldwell had always dreamed of giving Lucy the stability he never had growing up. After years of working overtime in his federal job, he saved enough to buy a home in a suburban community known for its quiet streets and sense of belonging. Lucy, in her late 20s, was already carving her own legacy. A graduate of one of the top universities, she had built a small but thriving business advising local companies on strategy and management. Her voice carried weight, not only because of her intelligence, but because of her grace. People listened when she spoke. Neighbors admired her work ethic and humility. For Dean, it was everything he could have hoped to see in his daughter. But beneath the friendly smiles of the neighborhood lurked a rigid and self-appointed HOA leader, Karen. She carried herself with authority, convinced it was her role to shape the community in her image. To Karen, every homeowner was a subject, and the HOA's rules applied like scripture. When she learned about Lucy, her reputation, the respect she commanded, and the way others looked up to her, Karen felt threatened. To maintain control, she decided the only way forward was to force Lucy into joining the HOA board. At first, it seemed like an invitation, friendly words about helping the community. But when Lucy politely declined, knowing the grip of HOA rules could smother independence, Karen's smile hardened. What began as an invitation turned into hostility. For Karen, no one told her no. And so, the neighborhood's fragile calm began to crack. The tension built gradually, almost invisibly at first. Neighbors who once waved at Lucy became distant. Rumors started to swirl. Whispers that Lucy was planning to undermine the HOA, or that she sought to disrupt the carefully crafted balance of the community. Dean noticed the shift before Lucy did. Walking home one evening, he overheard two board members muttering about outsiders moving in and changing everything. He knew what they meant, even if they didn't say it out loud. His family was respected, but not everyone had let go of their quiet prejudices. Lucy, however, stood firm. She declined Karen's repeated invitations with politeness, but clarity. I respect what you're doing, but I prefer to focus on my own work and neighbors, not HOA politics, she told her one afternoon. That refusal was all it took. Karen's behavior changed swiftly. Violation notices appeared on the Caldwell's mailbox, claims that their grass was too long, even though it wasn't, or that Lucy's car was parked incorrectly, despite being perfectly within the lines. Dean laughed it off at first, telling Lucy not to give it energy. But Lucy knew this was more than pettiness. It was targeted, calculated, and ultimately about power. Then came the escalation that rattled everyone. Karen attended a community gathering where Lucy answered a few questions from curious neighbors about small business development. Within minutes, Karen was publicly accusing Lucy of spreading misinformation and trying to destabilize the HOA structure. The confrontation ended with Karen storming away, vowing Lucy would regret disrespecting the order. A week later, police cars pulled up in front of the Caldwell home. Dean froze at the sight, knowing how wrong things could go in an instant. Lucy stepped outside calmly, her hand steady, as officers approached. Karen was standing proudly nearby, pointing toward Lucy, shouting accusations of spreading lies and refusing HOA orders. But something strange happened. As the officers approached Lucy, instead of hostility, their demeanor shifted. One officer straightened his posture, nodded, and raised a subtle salute. Another smiled, addressing her with quiet respect. Karen's face twisted in confusion. She had expected a spectacle. Handcuffs, humiliation, a neighbor dragged away. Instead, the air grew heavy with a secret she had not known. Karen had brought the law to Lucy's doorstep, Unaware, Lucy was the law. The moment crystallized in stunned silence. Karen stood frozen, her words caught in her throat as she watched officers defer to the very person she wanted them to arrest. Lucy Caldwell, the young entrepreneur admired by so many, was, in fact, a sworn sheriff for that county. Not a ceremonial role, not an honorary title. A fully vested officer of the law, respected for her integrity and her duty to protect. Karen's face flushed red with anger and disbelief. She had imagined herself victorious, bringing down the neighbor who dared to defy her authority. Instead, she had stumbled into the harsh light of truth, and now everyone was watching. Dean watched from the porch, his chest tight with both pride and anger. This wasn't just about an HOA spat. It was about something deeper, the refusal to see his daughter as equal, the assumption that her voice could be silenced, her presence diminished. For Karen, this wasn't just about HOA rules, but about putting Lucy in her place and failing. As murmurs rippled through the gathered neighbors, Karen's last fragment of composure collapsed. Her hand fumbled at her side before she pulled something from her purse, a firearm. Gasps echoed, a scream pierced the silence, and time itself seemed to freeze. She pointed the weapon at Lucy, shaking with rage. But Lucy didn't flinch. She stood firm, eyes locked on Karen, her voice steady. The officers, already on high alert, closed in swiftly, disarming Karen within seconds. The community, once divided in whispers, now stood united in shock at what had nearly unfolded. In that instant, the story shifted forever. No longer was this about HOA control. It was about hate, power, and the danger of unchecked prejudice pushed to its breaking point. Karen was taken away that evening, her power crumbling faster than she could process. The arrest wasn't just for reckless endangerment and pulling a firearm. It was a statement that the community could no longer ignore the ugliness that had festered under the surface. For Dean and Lucy, the days that followed were filled with reflection. Dean couldn't help replaying the scene in his mind, his daughter standing unshaken while a gun was aimed at her. It was a nightmare every parent fears. But Lucy's steady resolve reminded him of the truth he always knew. His daughter wasn't just smart or respected. She was powerful, capable, and unwilling to shrink in the face of injustice. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact began approaching them with apologies, words of support, and in some cases, gratitude. Lucy had unknowingly become the catalyst for a conversation the neighborhood desperately needed about race, power, and fairness. But Lucy was not interested in becoming a symbol. She simply lived by the creed she had always followed: protect people, stand on principle, and never let fear dictate your choices. Looking back at it, Dean realized something profound. This wasn't just a neighborhood conflict. It was a reflection of the bigger issues many face every day. Systems of control, prejudice hidden beneath surface civility, and the way racism often disguises itself behind rules and authority. And yet, here was his daughter, showing the strength to confront it head on. As the story spread beyond their block, people asked the same question: how could someone let hate drive them so far that they pulled a gun on their own neighbor? Maybe the better question, Dean thought, was this: how many more people must endure the same struggle before communities everywhere finally see each other as equals? The choice he realized wasn't just for that HOA, it was for all of us.